Hey everyone, it's DT from TUWH, and today I'm going to be going over how to create a very basic mobile app. So before we get started, just a bit of a disclaimer. Although the framework that we're going to be using today is great for creating simple apps to display projects, or even just to show some basic data or something along those lines. It's not the best for if you want like super specific details or you want to have like the cleanest animations. But with that being said, in order to use those kind of like increased specificity, you have to use something called like React Native or Flutter, which are a little bit more complicated to explain and involve 3 different programming languages. So for most people, this is something that's really easy to use and will allow you to create a great mobile app. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, you're going to want to go ahead and navigate to something called Thunkify. It's basically an app design software that allows you to create very simple and easy to use apps pretty much through a drag and drop coding method, which is super great and easy to use and really allows you to create something very quickly. So once you're there, you're going to go ahead and click create a new app, and we're going to go and call this TWH project display. Okay, we're going to go ahead and create it. So just as a bit of background about what this app that we're creating is going to look like, this app is just basically going to show all the projects that we did in TUWH last year and a little bit of specifications about all of them. This is something that's super simple and easy to come up with in less than 20 to 30 minutes. And it's great just because you can create something very simply that's pretty much functional. Obviously, everything I'm going to be going over today is just an example of what you can do using the software. There's obviously like a lot more components that I'm not even going to touch on, but yeah, feel free to play around with it. There's really a lot that you can do with the software in a really simple manner. So just getting started, you're going to go ahead and see something that looks like a little phone screen over here. This is an example of a screen. So this is basically something that could potentially show up on your phone depending on how you program it. So this is also going to be your blank canvas where you can go ahead and drop different things depending on what you basically want to show and have on your app. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to rename this screen to our start screen. So to do that, you're just going to hit this screen and then go ahead over to this pencil button and change this to say start instead. So to kind of match the TWH color theme, which is this dark green color, we're going to change this background color as well into something that matches that. So over here, you'll just see like a color palette. You can either go ahead and manually choose one using RGBA values or just doing this drag and drop, but something that's a little bit easier, especially if you already know the code and the color that you want, is just to go ahead and use a hex code. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to copy that over into this box and hit enter. Oops. Okay, cool. So now you can see that we've got this dark green background, which is perfect to match our TWH logo. You also have the option to add a picture if you wanted to. So if I wanted to make the logo look appear on the whole screen, that was definitely something I could do. And you can choose how you want this photo to fill, as well as like where it looks like. The screen also doesn't necessarily have to take up the whole actual dimensions of your phone. You can have it padded so the screen starts in a different location. So for example, if I was supposed to do this, it moves the screen down a little bit. However, that's not really something I want to do. So I'm just going to leave it how it is. So yeah, that's all there really is for the start screen. So for the start screen, something that I really want to have this do is to have it have basically the logo and like a tap to start button. So when you click this screen, it'll go ahead and take you to all the projects, just like a launch screen would on any normal phone. So the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and put in an image. So I'm just going to go ahead here and search image and drag and drop this component out to the screen. So immediately you'll see it pop up, and it's going to be underneath this start screen, which is super easy to use just because you can clearly tell what each component is part of the screens, and this is super helpful when we start adding screens. So now I want to change this to look like the actual TWH logo, so I'm going to go ahead and go into my files and choose the logo. Great, so now we can see that we've got the logo pulled up on the screen and we're good to go. So if I wanted this logo to basically look different on my screen, I can actually change it using this picture resize mode. So for example, if I wanted to stretch it or contain it, it should actually basically reset when you actually show this on the actual app. This display over here isn't the best at showing exactly what it's going to look like. So oftentimes you really do want to click this live test button to see what it's actually going to look like on a phone. But for now, this cover mode is perfectly fine. So we're just going to leave it as that. For the height and width, 150 is the default image size. So without compressing it, that's what it looks like. So I think I'm just going to leave it as that. But you're also welcome to change this. So I can make this, for example, like 300, which would look like that. But that's not what I want to do. So I'm just going to leave that as is. These are the margins. So this basically allows you to determine how far out it is from these sides. And the padding does the same thing, except this does it. This is a little bit better to use because this does it in relation to other components, which we'll see as soon as I drag the next component out there. That's it for adding the image. The next thing I want to do is to have like a little prompt that says tap to start. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use this label button right here. And I'm going to go ahead and drag it to be on top of the image because that's where I want this label to be. So something that's really important to note is when you drag things over, you can either put them on the screen itself or you can put it here. I prefer to basically put it on this side just because that allows you to basically show the order of components on your screen. So I wanted the label to be above the image, so I dragged it here. But if I was to move this below, it would automatically move it below the image. So something that's really important to know. So for this label text, I want it to say tap to start. Okay, and I can change the font size as necessary. So if I want to make this like bigger, I'm gonna make it 25. And then the color, I would prefer white on this background. So I'm gonna go ahead and make it white. You can also choose to make it italic if you wanted to, or just normal, as well as the alignment of the text. You can make it centered or justified, and the height, width, basic other things like that. So great, now that we've got the start page done, we can go ahead and move on to creating the next page and start animating things as well. So to create another page, all you're going to want to do is hit this plus button right here. And you'll be taken to basically another screen that you can program to as you want. So I want this screen to be my home page, so I'm going to go ahead and relabel this as home. And before I actually go ahead and put down components here, I do want to make sure that when I tap this page, it actually does go ahead and transition over to the home screen. So in order to do that, I'm going to mouse over to something called blocks. So for those of y'all who've used a programming language just like Scratch or Snap, this should look very familiar. It's very, very basic drag and drop block programming features, which makes this super easy to use and pretty much intuitive, which is something that's great, especially if you're trying to create an app really quickly. So for example, something that I want to do is basically when this start screen is clicked, I want it to, oops, that's not what to do. Sorry, when this image is clicked, I basically want it to go ahead and go over to the home page. All right, so in order to do that, I'm going to go into this control and I'm going to find this navigate to block. So this is basically going to allow me to change the page that this goes to. So I can go ahead and click navigate to home when this is clicked. If I wanted to do something else, such as like change the color or basically like wait some time, cause the phone to vibrate or something like that, that would also be something I could do. There's like a couple different features that allow you to do that. Yeah, so it's very simple to do. There's a lot of things, but just because we're trying to keep this simple as possible, I just wanted to navigate to the home screen. So let's go ahead and test it. So to test it, you can click this live test button. So it's actually really easy to actually get this up on your device, and I can pull that up in a second as well. But just for the sake of this app, it's not really necessary. So as you can see, when I was messing with the images earlier, it actually caused this image to look like this and cover the screen, which is not what I wanted to do. So we'll go ahead and fix that. But if I tap to start, it successfully navigates over to that next screen. So this is why it's really important to make sure that you're testing apps repeatedly just to make sure you don't have problems arise like that. So here's what the app is going to look like now. And this is how I wanted it to look. So we're good to go. So tap to start and it mouses over to the next page. Great, so let's go ahead and move on to the home page. So for this page, I want something a little bit more complicated. I basically want to show different buttons with each project name and a little bit of an image depicting the project. on the screen in a way that basically allows me to clearly see what each project is and choose which one I actually want to use. So to do that, first, I'm going to go ahead again and change this background color back to that hex code I was talking about earlier, just to keep things kind of uniform between different pages. So that now that we've got that color done, we can go ahead and start adding components in. So I'm going to go ahead and close the Start tab and have this home page open just so it easily allows me to basically have different things present. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and create a button icon, which I'm going to go put in underneath this inside this home page. And you can see immediately that like a button pops up on the screen. So I want the text of this button to be the solar powered autoclave. So that's what I'm going to rename it to. Oops, let's spell that one. Solar powered autoclave, right? So right now this button looks really small, doesn't look super great, and doesn't really fulfill the need of showing what the project is before we click it. So in order to do that, we're gonna go ahead and actually insert a background picture into this place. So again, we're gonna go upload files and find the picture of the solar powered autoclave to put in there. Great. And now you can see that there's a really tiny picture of an autoclave that's popped up, which is not exactly what we were going for when we were creating this app. So again, we want to go ahead and change how this picture looks on here. So to do that, again, we're going to basically change this background picture resize mode to basically contain the button. So if we go ahead and launch it, this button still doesn't show. So that's not the one that we want to use. We can do cover. And now we can see that this whole button is covered by the solar powered autoclave. However, again, this is really small. We want this button to be big so we can see the whole picture. And we can clearly see that this is, in fact, the solar powered autoclave project. Oops, did not want to do that. So to do that, we're going to start messing around with height and width. So the first thing that you need to know is with these heights, you have options to do an absolute size, which basically allows you to give it a definition in terms of pixel, or relative size, which basically says that I want this button to take up this amount of the screen. So in my opinion, it's a lot easier to use relative size just because that allows you to basically position things on a screen depending on how many different things that you do have on that screen, which I think is a lot easier to use than trying to figure out how many pixels you want it to be. So we're going to go ahead and use relative size. So from here, I can enter in a percentage. Say I want this to take up 25% of the screen. Oops. Or let's do 20 actually. So 20% of the screen is going to be taken up by this. And then the width, I want this to be the whole screen. So we're going to do 100%. Great. And now you can pretty clearly see that this button is taking up the whole screen. So this picture is still not exactly how I want it, so we're going to go ahead and try a couple different things. So this stretch is actually something that allows the whole picture to be seen. Something that's good to notice is that this text is actually like a little bit faint on here, so we're going to go ahead and change that color into something else and bold that text. So in order to change the text color, what we can do is we can go here and basically manipulate this to what we want. So say I wanted black, now that's black. In this case, we might actually stick with the white just because that pops a little bit more. But yeah, super simple to do, allows you to do that. I'm gonna go ahead and raise this button as well, just because that'll make it look like an actual button, like it's popping up from the screen, which is something that's really nice to see as well. So if I go to the live test, something that you'll notice is that the text is actually centered on the page, unlike what it looked like before. This is something, again, that emphasizes the need to obviously run live tests while you're coding just to see what this looks like. So right now, if I click on this button, it's not going to do anything. It's going to show I'm clicking on it. But since I haven't actually coded anything for the button to do, there really isn't anything that's going to happen. So the next thing I want to do is add in another button. I want this button to be below the initial button. So I'm just going to move that here. And I'm going to rename this button to be the ultrasonic vision. Speaking of which, I did not rename the initial button, so I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. Cool. So back to the ultrasonic vision button. Here's the part where it gets pretty repetitive. It's going to be pretty much the same, but yeah, we're basically going to want to create a button that says ultrasonic vision and replicate what we did with the above button on this other button as well. So I'm going to do that really quickly. Again, I'm putting in the photo to basically cover this, and then we're going to go ahead and choose contain. Stretch, sorry. And then we're going to go with the height and width, and then we're going to do relative size. I'll give that 20%. Oops, not 0. This is 100. Okay, cool. So clearly here, that text is not shown at all. So we do want to change this text color in this one to be something different. So we're going to go with black. Again, we're going to raise the button and bold the font. So something that you can clearly see at this point is that these buttons are basically touching each other, which is not what we want. We want this to be as close to the top of the screen as possible. So in order to fix that, what we're going to do is we're going to go to this button, and we're basically going to start messing around with our margins and our padding. So first off, something that we can do is basically go ahead and start changing our padding. So at the top, I want only 10 pixels, and that basically just moves it down in the thing. But for margins, for example, I did 10 and moves it down from that initial top of the screen. So for some reason, it's defining basically this button to start at the middle of the screen, which is not what we want it to do. So in order to basically fix that, we want to go ahead and find that feature within this. So positioning, we can go into our advanced options, and then this basically allows us to see where exactly it is. So line options, and then we can say we don't want this centered. So there's a couple of different options that we can use there. But before we get into that, we should also go ahead and add the third button. That way we can all reposition them at once. So I misspoke earlier by saying that we needed to reposition them now. So again, we're going to go ahead and add in a third button. It's going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to say that this button is going to be called the machine learning malaria detection, just for brevity. Okay, cool. Again, change the background picture to something that matches. Oops, that's not the one I wanted. Let's change that again. Cool. And then resize that to stretch. The relative height and width again. Cool. Now you can see that we've got 3 buttons. This obviously doesn't look as good as we would like it to. Oh, forgot. Need to rename this. Renamed ML malaria detection. So basically, in order to get these margins to look like they're in the same place, something that we're going to do is we're going to start messing with, or sorry, not these buttons. We're going to start messing with these margins. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and click this first button, and I'm going to go ahead and type 35 pixels. So at first that doesn't look like it does much. In fact, it lowers it, if anything. But as we go ahead and adjust these other margins, it'll actually start changing how this looks. So again, I'm going to go ahead and do 35, and you can see that this button moves up now. And then here, I'm also going to do 35. That button moves up. So right now, there looks like there's like a lot of space on the bottom, a lot of space on the top. So something that we can do to fix that is actually make these buttons a little bit bigger. So instead of doing 20%, let's do 25%. Not 5%, 25%. There we go. Do that with the second one and the third one, and it'll adjust automatically, which is something that's really great because you're not having to mess around with like pixel sizes or anything like that, which is really convenient, especially when you're making things. So you can see this looks a lot better now. These margins still look a little bit off, so I'm going to go ahead and basically shrink them a little bit. just so they're a little bit cleaner. So we're gonna do 30, do 30, get this to be 30 as well. Great. So now we've got this basically in a section where we can have all the 3 buttons on the screen. All the pictures are shown. So yeah, so let's go ahead to live test. Make sure everything looks right. So we have this tap to start. We have all our buttons showing, and it looks clean on the screen. So we're good to go on that end. Now we actually have to make these buttons do something, because right now these are just buttons that are basically sitting there. So in order to do that, we're going to go ahead and go into our blocks and do something very similar to what we were doing before. So firstly, before misspoke again, but before we can actually get into the blocks, we need to create other pages for these buttons to actually navigate to. So let's go ahead and do that. So the screen is going to be my solar powered autoclave screen. Oops. Doesn't look like that as it did. Being glitchy. Not sure why it's not letting me edit it, but I'm just gonna leave that alone for now and come back to it. It's gonna be my ultrasonic vision screen. My computer's acting up. Okay, we can have them just be labeled screen 1, screen 2, screen 3. That's not that big of a deal. Yeah, so let's try that again. There we go. So that looks like it's renaming now. Not sure why I wasn't doing it before. Maybe ultrasonic. And keep in mind, these screen names are mainly for reference, so they don't need to be like exact or anything like that. And this will be malaria. Okay, cool. So with that done, we can go ahead and jump into actually making these blocks and these buttons do what we want them to. So we're gonna go ahead into blocks again. And this time we're gonna go ahead and actually mouse over to these buttons. So for the first button, our solar powered autoclave, we're gonna click this and just say when solar powered autoclave is clicked. We can also do long click, touch down, touch up, depending on what you want to do, but click is pretty much what we want. So we're gonna leave it as that, and we're gonna say navigate to our autoclave page. Do the same thing with the ultrasonic vision and malaria. So that's long click, but change that to click really easily. And then navigate over to ultrasonic. And then finally for the malaria, when the malaria is clicked, we want it to navigate over to the malaria page. So before we test this right now, all 3 of these pages look the exact same. Oh, no, I want to leave. Not sure what happened. Okay. Oh, that's weird. Yeah, sometimes this acts a little bit funky, so you have to do things to kind of just make sure that you don't delete anything by accident, which is super important. So now we basically got these screens here. So again, just to keep it that constant background color, we're gonna go ahead and insert that color in. Okay, so we've got that in place. And then we want to basically add an image of this autoclave again, and then some text underneath that basically describes what it is. So in order to do that, similar tools to what we were using earlier. So we're going to go ahead and find an image. Put that in. And then right underneath, we're going to go ahead and look for a label. Oh, border. Just move it. Oh no, that's not what we wanted. Yeah. Great. Okay, cool. So first things first, getting this image in. So we're going to go ahead and upload an image. So, and then since it's just the autoclave image, we can actually leave that here. So we want this height to be basically like fill content, fill container, fill content, fill container. We go to the live test, we can see what that looks like. And that's not really what we want because this is like absolute dimensions right now. So we actually have to say fill contents or fill container. So we're gonna say fill contents, fill contents. Oh, and that fills the entire screen, which is not what we wanted. So fill container is basically gonna fill the screen because that's the container that it's in. is this, which is not what we want. So we're going to go ahead and actually just do a relative size, or an absolute size for this one actually. So let's go ahead and put this at 200, or let's do 150 actually. 150, oh, no, 200 is better. And then we can keep this width at what it's at right now, because if it folds the screen, that's perfectly fine. And then go over to this label, and we're gonna make this label solar powered autoclave. Okay, cool. So now we've got this text on here, we've got this picture on here, and something that you notice immediately is that this text is touching this picture. So again, this time we're going to try playing around with padding. So on the top, we're going to say we want 10 pixels of space. And this basically moves down the text within the container that it's in. So in this case, the container that the text is in is this label element. So this basically allows you to move things within the label, which is somewhat easier to use than adjusting it relative to everything else, especially for text containers and things. So that looks good. And then we're going to change this font size to be a little bit bigger. So we'll make this 20, 24, nice and big. And then we'll change this color to be white as opposed to black. Cool. So now that we've got that text on there, we can go ahead and add in the actual description. So underneath, I'm going to go ahead and put label as well. And then change the padding to be 10. So it's a little bit lower again. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and copy in the text about what this is. That way, people can clearly see what we did just by reading this. So we're going to change this to that, and then make this font size a little bit smaller. Make this 15. Actually, I think this is a little bit big, so we're going to go back down to 20. Okay, cool. So I can clearly see what's the title, what's not the title. Something that immediately catches my eye when I'm looking at this is that this isn't centered. So we can go ahead and center this. And in order to do that, what you can do is go to this text line, and then we can say center. I can also make this bolder. For example, I can do that. 1, 2. And I can change the font style to be italic again. So for this one, since this is a title, I'm going to go ahead and bold this and leave it as that. So the screen looks pretty good. It's got just the basic information about the solar powered autoclave and a picture, a nice graphic basically showing what it is. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the ultrasonic page, which is pretty much the same thing. These last 2 pages are going to be very similar to what we were doing here, just replicating with different information. So yeah. Again, so we're going to add an image. And then 2 labels. So before I go ahead and do this, I forgot to change the background color, so we're going to go do that. Get this hex code here. Great. And now upload this image again. Very similar process to what we were doing before. And this is for ultrasonic, so we're going to do vision. You can see what I did for the height and widths on this one, just to match 200 and then full container. Great. Now we've got that picture here clearly. Go to the label, type in ultrasonic vision. Again, change the color to be white so it stands out a little bit better. Font size is going to be 20. I'm going to bold this. And the padding is going to be 10. So you guys are probably starting to see exactly and get the hang of what I'm doing. It's something that really is quite simple to learn. You can pick it up in like a day or so, or even less than that. So this is great, again, for creating simple and easy to use apps very efficiently. So make this font size 15. Again, change the color to white so it stands out more. And then center this text. So something that I'm noticing right now is that this text is basically touching the edge of the screen, which is not something I want to happen. So I'm going to actually add some left and right padding. So to do that, I can do 10 here, 10 here, which makes this a little bit cleaner to look at. For the autoclave, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing because it is also touching the edges. Go to the padding, and again, 10 and 10. Okay, cool. And then finally the malaria, exact same thing that we've been doing for the last couple screens. Change the text code. Okay, background picture we don't want, but we need 2 labels. And an image. Image likely didn't show up. I'm gonna go ahead and close some of these tabs so it's a little bit easier to navigate. Cool. So now we've got our components again. Same thing that we've been doing. Make this height 200, make the width. Build a container. And then actually upload the picture before resizing as well. So this one I'm actually going to upload a different picture that gives a little bit more detail than the one I used for the main screen. Cool. And then finally for our labels, we can go ahead and change this into something that's a little bit more specific as well. So machine, oops. Base. Malaria detection. Ah, great. So this isn't centered, so we're gonna make this 20. Change the color. Make this bolded. Oops, wrong one. And then finally center it. Oh, and the padding as well. Cool. And for this label, we're going to change that text to match what the malaria description is. Center this again. Go to our padding. Just that. Great, and that's pretty much it. So something, that looks good actually. So yeah, so this is great and all, but something that we've noticed is basically once you're on one of these screens, you can't really go to the other ones. So if I was to go to this live test, oh, wait for it to load. Tap to start, and go to this ultrasonic vision page. Oh, and that image looks weird. So something that we need to fix immediately. So basically, let's go ahead and go back and see what we did wrong. Let me make sure it does it for all of them as well. Yeah, so it's doing that for all of it. So this is something that we definitely do want to fix. So let's see if we can figure out what the problem is here. So clicking on this image right off the bat, oh, we can tell that this fill container is basically causing this image to stretch out to maximize the entire container. So as opposed to doing this relative and absolute like we were earlier, we're going to go ahead and do relative. We're going to keep this at 40. And then for our width, we're going to keep this at 100, not 0. Cool. And then fix that for the rest of them. And this is something that you'll notice when you're making an app. There's a lot of like trial and error involved in making sure that everything looks good. So it's really just important to make sure that you're adjusting things as necessary and that you're testing often. And then finally the malaria. Okay, cool. And now let's live test this again. And that renders like we want it to look, so we're good to go. So something else that we're noticing is that once I'm on this page, there's no way for me to go back and look at the other pages, which is where a nav bar would come in. So nav bar is basically something that's just going to pop up at the bottom of the screen that allows you to go between projects. So we're going to go ahead and insert that in now. So let's go ahead and close all of these things up, just so it's easy to see. And we're going to go ahead and delete this. And basically see if we can find bottom tab navigator. Great. So we're going to go ahead and drag this up into here. Oh, let me go up a little bit. And you can see by default, it comes with these home, about, contact setting pages, right? Which is not what we want. So if I was to go into the live test, and actually none of these would pop up because we don't have any of these pages. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these because these don't exist. And these are not the pages that we want. And instead, I'm going to actually move these other pages into this bottom tab navigator. So this basically means that these pages are going to be navigatable by this bottom tab, which is something that we want to see. Great. So now let's go ahead and get into the actual logistics of these bottom tabs. So first of all, you see something called active tint color, active background color, inactive tint color, and inactive background color. So what this basically means is when this nav bar pops up on the bottom of the screen, which is something that's a little bit inconvenient about this app, you actually can't see the nav bar rendered. But once it is there, what you're gonna have is you're gonna have a series of buttons that basically are gonna show one color when you're not on that page, and another color when you are on that page. So for the sake of this, we're gonna go ahead and choose some pre-designed colors. Okay, so for this, we're just gonna choose like a light blue. And then the active tint, active background. Basically, the active tint is just showing like if you wanted this to be kind of opaque, which we don't really want that to happen. So it's really not that big of a deal. So we're gonna put that in there. And then we're gonna move this over to be lighter. Do the same thing with this. Cool. And then now, right now, if I go to the live test, this is either not going to show up at all, or it's basically going to show up as just something very light. So you can see it. This is the page that we're on, but this isn't really navigatable. You can't see any icons, and it's really hard to basically see what you're navigating to. But you can clearly see that as I switch pages, it basically navigates over to different pages as well. So that's good. Yeah, so to edit this actual rendering of what this is going to look like, what I want to do is basically go back to the screen, and then we're going to see something called this tab navigator icon, right? So for basically this tab navigator icon, we don't want the text of this to show up, but we want basically to insert an icon that allows us to determine what exactly we're looking at. So we're going to change this tab bar visible to false, or sorry, tab bar visible to true. But we're going to change this tab icon to something that's basically allows us to distinguish that, hey, this is basically the malaria thing. So we're going to choose just an image of a virus, which is something that's easy to use. And make sure that we choose active and inactive because we do want this thing to show at all times. We don't want a tab bar label. Okay, cool. So now, if I was to go to live test, I should see the little virus icon pop up. And you can clearly see that there's a little virus icon right there. So it still says that word malaria, which is not something that we do want it to display. So we can go ahead and delete that. So in order to actually make this nav bar basically not show the label, we're actually going to need to go back to the bottom tab navigator, and we're going to set this show label to false. Okay, and we're going to basically do that same thing with the icons for the ultrasonic vision and malaria. So upload a file, basically showing, in this case, glasses. Do that for the inactive as well. We're good to go. And then finally for the autoclave, we're going to go ahead and do just a sun. Okay, cool. And we're pretty much good to go. Let's go ahead and live test this to make sure that it looks good. So again, tap to start. We've got all the buttons loading, solar powered autoclave, and I can clearly see that. But if I wanted to go to the ultrasonic vision, I can mouse over there, and finally the machine learning based malaria app. So we're pretty much it. That's pretty much it. For the app, we've got basically everything that we want to see in place, and we're good to go. So if I wanted to basically render this on my device, which is what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how that works as well. So I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to stop sharing and actually go into the Thunkable app. The Thunkable app basically looks like this. It's going to launch, and then we're going to go back, and we can see this project display. So we've got this app pop up right here, and then we can tap to start just as we intended. We've got our projects. I can mouse between them just as I wanted, and I can actually swipe back to go to different pages as well, which is something that's cool. So yeah, that's it for the video. Hope you guys learned a little bit more about app development. Of course, there's a wide variety of other functions that are available within Thunkable that you can use as well. For example, if you wanted to pull data from a database instead, you can actually integrate this with something called Firebase, which is super useful to use. And then you can actually get this into actual React Native code as well, which allows you to basically take something that you prototype within Thunkable and actually turn it into something that's more usable. So obviously, this is a great way to get into the beginning, the start of app design, and basically see something that's super easy to use, but allows you to basically create something that's a very simple app. So hope you guys enjoyed this and it wasn't too long. And yeah, have a good summer. Bye.